listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Subscribe, listen, take home the title.
What's up, Takeaway Nation? Welcome into our Week 3 review show. We have just wrapped up halftime in the Bears-Redskins game. We are recording late, getting ready to give you guys some fantasy knowledge. Guys, I want to point this out, and I told Jeff this in the pre-show. I feel like the halftime guest for this game was ominous. Do y'all know what I mean?
I didn't even pay attention to who the halftime guest was.
It was Blink-182, and they have that one song, Hello There, the Angel from My Nightmare, the shadow in the background of the morgue. I mean, they're describing Khalil Mack.
That's terrible.
I mean, I'm just saying, it seemed ominous for the night.
I feel like it was pretty fitting, actually. I mean, old Casey Keenum's back there, just terrified right now, waiting for the Haskins show to start.
Yeah, I wouldn't throw Haskins in this game, but I think the writing's on the wall for Keenum after this.
I say, you know what? Last few minutes of the game, throw him in there. Let's see what happens. Or even if it's the last quarter, I think both teams are kind of taking their foot off the gas a little bit. It's okay. Throw him in there.
I think that you get fired if Khalil Mack is still in the game and knocks Haskins' head off and he gets a concussion and he's out for 3 weeks. I think you're immediately fired if that happens.
I think Jay Gruden is going to be immediately fired after week 4 regardless. I mean, this team is bad. They don't look good. They don't appear to be getting better. They actually appear to be regressing from their week 1 performance. That's not a good look. I think he's a dead man walking.
I think they need a real GM because the team really doesn't have that much talent.
Yeah, well, Bruce Allen's buried that roster for so long, and he's just such an old head that he doesn't understand the way of the NFL currently. And you've got Jay Gruden, who, I mean, he's a fine coach. I don't know if he's the best head coach, but Bruce Allen doesn't know his players' names. I don't think he really understands how the salary cap works. I don't think he understands analytics at all. And, despite having some talented players, I think they do have some talented players, they just don't do enough to keep this roster competitive.
Cheer up, Redskins fans. It could always be worse. You could be Lions fans.
Oh, you could be Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, I was going to say, that should have been a Dolphins joke right there.
I mean, either or. I mean, I read the Calvin Johnson interview that came out over the weekend, and so I've got Lions on the brains. It was pretty scathing. It was not good to read if you're a fan of their organization.
How many fans do they have? Is anyone that doesn't live in Detroit a fan of them?
I mean, I feel like I could fit all of their fans on my couch.
You probably could. You're probably right. All right, guys, let's dive into this show. We've got a good bit to cover, and we're always going to start out with some news and notes.
News and notes from across the NFL.
Oh, my God, guys, finally, the Antonio Brown story gets a pause. We can hit the pause button. This will be the last time we talk about him for a while because I don't want to bring up any more of the drama that surrounds him. He's been released by the Patriots. This happened a few days ago over the weekend. And despite claims that other teams are interested, no one will make a move until his current cases are resolved. I even saw a new one this morning about having to go to a deposition in a few days for something about trashing an apartment. So for now, we can stop talking about him. I think he's done. He announced that he wasn't playing again anyway, but I don't believe him ever. Now, just is over.
Cool. So we're done with him now.
Done.
Yeah.
Finished.
All right, moving on to some injury news. We will do our full injury roundup as usual on our Thursday show, but this one's pretty big. Saquon Barkley is going to miss some time, and by some time, I mean 6 to 8 weeks. This has to hurt for a guy that was a top 3 fantasy pick.
I am crushed in our admins and mods league for the NFL fantasy football discussion. T.Y. Hilton is my wide receiver 1/2, and Saquon Barkley is obviously my running back 1. I'm so screwed. I mean, I have good bench points there, but not 20 points a week bench points.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley is a player and a half. Some weeks, when he's really on, he can legitimately put up wide receiver numbers and running back numbers at the same time. So it's pretty devastating. I mean, I've got a few shares of him, but it's all in dynasty format. And so where I have him, I also happen to have Gallman. One league, I also have LaShawn McCoy and a couple other players that happen to be playing pretty well right now. So I'm not as burned as some other folks, but man, waiver wire is going to be hopping this week.
Yeah, how much do you spend on him?
On Gallman?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it really depends on who else is out there. I mean, obviously Gallman is not Barkley, but I want to have him. I'm probably not going to blow out half my fab for him. But again, you have to know your own league and your own waiver wire and understand, okay, well, what's out there? And, if I'm not going after Gallman, is there another guy I can get cheaper? Like, you've got to kind of make that individualized, assumption there.
All right. That's really it for news and notes. With the injury roundup being on our Thursday show, there's not really a lot to talk about as far as the relevant things that happened over the weekend. That's at this point of the season, it's injuries. And that's mainly it, right, guys?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you get the occasional trade, so,
Come on, Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get a trade done. If their line is 2 first, like if that Baltimore trade, did you guys see that Baltimore trade that they said got turned down? Like, I don't know if that's actually true, but if you turn down, because it was, Hayden Hurst, a first-round pick and something else?
It was a 1 of 2 in Hayden Hurst.
Yeah, see, like, that's a deal for if Jalen Ramsey isn't happy and he's going to be a malcontent in your locker room, that's a deal you have to take. You're not taking a deal if you're not taking that deal.
Yeah, I don't think Jacksonville wants to take a deal at all. I think Shad Khan has already told Tom Coughlin and everyone else in the organization that he wants to pay Jalen Ramsey and figure it out. I think the real hang up here is going to be, they played well on Thursday. They got a W. But if this team goes 7-9, 8-8, are we talking about Marone and Coughlin being on the outs? Because this team has had arguably one of the most talented defenses in the league and is badly underperformed. And you got to wonder, if the owner's going to override the personnel people, like how long are the personnel people going to be there?
I think if Gardner Minshew gets you to 8-8, you're in a situation at that point where, at least Coughlin is safe because he went out and drafted a 6th-round quarterback that can start and get you 8 wins. But I think Marone should be out just for having you can't have arguments with your players on the sidelines where you're getting physically violent with them. That's just not something that a head coach that has control of his team should be doing.
Yeah, I think we always talk about coaches that should be on the hot seat or that aren't very good. And somehow his name always escapes the conversation. Like we're always talking about somebody else for some reason, but he wasn't good in Buffalo. He's bad. Yeah, he was bad. And he still got another job. And he underperformed badly last year with a pretty decent Jacksonville roster. Say what you want about the quarterback play, but that defense did not play up to its ability. And he's not enough of an offensive guru to, make up for that gap. So I just look at this guy and I'm like, how does he keep getting jobs? And why hasn't he been fired yet?
I said that when Jalen Ramsey said that he wanted a trade. The obvious choice here, I'm not even a big Jalen Ramsey guy. I think that he's a totally overrated cornerback, but he's really talented. And Doug Marone's not a good coach. So if the problem is Doug Marone or Jalen Ramsey, and if neither exist in the same room, then everything's okay. Doug Marone's the guy that should go.
I 100% agree.
During that, y'all mentioned bad coaches. You mentioned Buffalo. Jeff, you want to say something funny?
Always.
Hey, Joe, Rick Dennison.
I hate Rick Dennison so much. I don't have to have the passionate hatred of him anymore just because I don't have to think about him right now.
I mean, yeah, but the early years of the fantasy takeaway, that name brought some anger to your voice.
Oh, yeah. I hate him to death. Talk about hiring bad coaches. He's probably the worst that I've ever seen. He had no idea what he was doing.
So I just need to keep mentioning his name to force you to think about him and just to send you into a blind rage.
I mean, we don't have to start this battle here. Do you really want me to talk about how bad Jimmy Garoppolo's lower body mechanics are on every show?
I do. I want to hear that every single show.
I actually looked into that a little bit more. I spent a little bit of time watching that against Pittsburgh. It's all I couldn't not look at it actually.
And what did you think?
Well, I see a guy who he didn't seem that off kilter, but he pushes off his back foot. He doesn't bring it through. He doesn't have.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And he's still getting torque from his core, but he's getting it differently than other guys. It's kind of like how pitchers have different windups and different release points and just different ways they can torque their body. I see a guy who pushes pretty hard off his back foot. He seems like he's still in rhythm, but I'm really worried about that release point still. He had a couple of balls that weren't well placed coming across the middle of the field. Instead of them leading the receiver by about 12 inches, he was putting it either about 4 inches behind them off their chest, or he was getting up high where those guys are exposed to a big hit. And, you could see it when you're out there throwing, 2 picks and completing 65% of your passes in a league where you should have 70.
All right, let's move on from this ridiculously long news and notes segment where we talk about coaches we don't like. Let's talk about our cheap date guys from last week. Let's review these players that we had chosen for you to throw in if you just needed some help. And myself, I'm going to start out with me. I had Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, Peyton Barber at running back, Cole Beasley at wide receiver, Jason Witten at tight end, and the Bucs defense. That netted me a nice 62.5 points. Guys, I don't feel too bad about this week. I wish I had picked somebody other than Peyton Barber, but not bad overall.
If you played a combination of those players, like Peyton Barber was your weak spot for sure, but if you played a combination of some of those guys and your studs hit in cash, you did fine for DFS.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the lineup on the whole is pretty decent. I mean, Peyton Barber gets you 7.5, the Bucs D 8. But beyond that, I mean, Witten 8.4. Okay, you got to kind of expect that. Cole Beasley 14.8. Jacoby Brissett got you 23.8. Like those are pretty solid returns.
And no one crapped the bed. That's the best part. No one really crapped the bed. You can't be excited about 7.5 points, but you can't be absolutely heartbroken like you would be like at 1 point or 2 points.
Or if you had Emmanuel Sanders get you 3 after he's given you 20 plus.
Yeah, nice segue into your lineup, Joe. We'll go over here where Joe had Mason Rudolph at quarterback, Miles Sanders at running back, Emmanuel Sanders, like you said, at wide receiver, Greg Olsen with monster game at tight end. You called that one perfectly. And the Cardinals defense crapped on you at the very end.
Yeah, man. Kyle Allen, who would have thought? Didn't he actually kind of look like a real NFL quarterback in that game?
I thought he looked real good.
It was great. I don't like Cam Newton. So straight up, I enjoyed watching that game so much.
It sucks that Cam Newton is broken, though. You might hate Cam Newton and hate his antics, but the league is much more fun and much more competitive when he's playing good football.
I can see that, and I can agree with that statement, but I think that he's been able to skate by for a long time being strictly an arm thrower and being a guy who's a see it and throw it kind of a guy. He doesn't really anticipate well, and now he's getting to the point where he can't really run it that well, and now he's being exposed, and defenses are able to sit back on him, so they need to get him 100% healthy and hope that we start seeing shades of the Cam Newton of yesteryear, because if we don't, you have to start wondering how long it's going to be before he starts getting replaced more regularly.
If he can't run the football, he's the worst quarterback in the NFL. Like, he's Blake Bortles if he can't run the football.
Wow.
Have you seen him throw?
I mean, no, he's pretty
such
bad.
A terrible intermediate
he's
passer.
pretty bad. No,
he's got a nice deep ball. It's relatively accurate, but any pass that's between 5 and 25 yards, he's got nothing. Like, he's one of the least accurate quarterbacks. He's terrible.
Yeah, and I think especially in the last couple of games we've seen him in, he's just been a mess. He's missing wide open receivers. He's just dropping dimes to the yardage markers is all he's doing. When that's all you can hit as a yardage marker, you're not really doing very well.
How does this performance by Kyle Allen make us feel? This is a total digression here, but how does it make you feel about the assets in that offense? Like, what are you doing with Curtis Samuel? Are you happy with owning DJ Moore? Is Greg Olsen a guy that you think is just a plug and play starter at tight end? Like, what's going on here?
He looked like a competent NFL quarterback. I don't think I'm as excited as I was, say, preseason week 4. When I was like, yeah, I'm going to have Cam, he's going to look great this year. He seems like he's semi-healthy. Here we go. I still have a little bit of, cautious optimism, I guess. We'll put it that way. But I mean, the kid looked sharp. And I mean, he played on the same roster as Kyler Murray at Texas A&M and beat him out, by the way. So he's a better passer, or at least he was at some point, than Kyler Murray. And he was the number 1 pick in the draft, and people seem to love him. So I feel pretty okay.
For the record, Joe, I'm a little disappointed in you thinking that I don't like Cam Newton because of his NFL antics. I enjoy meme material as much as the next man. It's because back in 2010, his comeback victory over Alabama actually denied me medical care for an extra 4 hours. Not liked him since. It's a personal grudge. Hate to admit it.
I think you got to get over that one.
No, never going to get over that.
Grudges aren't healthy.
I think it's
healthy.
more. I think it's more about. I think your grudge should be about the place that you live more than Cam Newton, personally.
You're right. It's crazy. People get stabbed over the Iron Bowl. It's insane.
That's nuts.
Yeah, dude.
Nope. Can't do it. Can't win with them.
Oh, man. I can't wait for this game this year. All right. Let's move on to Jeff. Joe, I forgot to mention your point total, 57.56. Jeff had a pretty good week, starting Daniel Jones, Devontae Freeman at running back, Dante Pettis at wide receiver, TJ Hawkinson at tight end. Didn't do too great for you. And the Bengals defense, middle of the road, 69.84. That means, Jeff, you won our cheap dates this week. You talked mad game against Joe last week, and so did I. So I think the big focus here is that Joe did come in last place, so we both beat Joe. Victories all around.
It's a grind,
Sorry,
gentlemen.
It is. Here's the thing, though. This lineup actually, Daniel Jones obviously carried it with a 39 point bomb. But Dante Pettis, getting that touchdown late, it was almost pretty bad. Would have had Pettis only with a couple points, Hawkinson with 1.1, and the Bengals defense with 5. Really, this group wasn't as sharp as I would have liked. Obviously, Daniel Jones, a great play. Devonta Freeman, great play. And I did have one stack where I tried to line up our guys here, Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and Evan Ingram. And that didn't work out well because the other running back I went with to get cute was Darwin Thompson. So needless to say, that lineup didn't work out that well for me.
Ouch. I mean, It sucks Saquon Barkley going down and only getting you 7 points too.
Yeah, I wanted to cry because every other guy I had in the lineup went bananas.
All right, guys, that'll do it for our cheat date review. Congrats, Jeff, on winning the week. I'm going to get you next week, though.
Bring it on, home slice.
All right, that leads us into our booth review segment. It's time to go over our what to watch fors for week 3. Y'all ready?
Let's do it.
I'm ready.
Booth review.
Well, I'm up first. I was talking about the Daniel Jones era, and holy cow, the Evan Ingram was going to smash call was fantastic. Not to pat my back too much, but he was really, really good, and he even left a little bit out on the field. Daniel Jones looks great. I'm not going to go out and say that he's going to give us top 5 QB numbers for the rest of the season because he had moments when he looked like a rookie during that game. And if Tampa Bay's defense had been able to capitalize, we might be telling a different story here. But he looked like an adequate NFL quarterback at worst. And that's been a lot better than what they've had with Eli Manning.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of nice seeing a quarterback in New York that could actually throw the ball, outside the numbers a little bit.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot of promise there suddenly for Sterling Shepard. If he's a guy that you can get cheap out there on your waiver wire this week, he might not be a bad option moving forward. Obviously Evan Ingram is going to be a solid play. Suddenly the Giants aren't the fantasy wasteland they were 10 days ago.
All right, Jeff, you're up. What was your first what to watch for?
Well, for me, it was all about all of the different quarterbacks, right? So not just Daniel Jones, but I was looking at guys like Mason Rudolph and Luke Falk and, Kyle Allen, we talked a little bit about earlier, Teddy Bridgewater. And it was kind of a mixed bag. Bridgewater had no yards, but he got you a couple of scores. You had Jones obviously had a monster game. Rudolph didn't look particularly sharp. I'm really concerned about my Juju as wide receiver 1, take earlier this offseason. I just don't think I can stand on that number moving forward because Mason doesn't look good under pressure, and he saw bullets all day against San Francisco. Falk, he looked okay on, I guess it was Monday Night Football last week, and the Patriots just completely exposed him, and he looked Falking bad. But it lets me know that we're going to have to tread lightly with a few of these teams and a few of the replacement quarterbacks. From a fantasy standpoint, I'm most excited, I think, about Kyle Allen, actually, because of DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel and Christian McCaffrey and Greg Olsen and Ian Thomas.
Yeah, I'm certainly not ready to trust Kyle Allen as my starter on my fantasy team, but I'm way more likely to throw a Curtis Samuel into my lineup now that I know that he's actually a viable quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, Daniel Jones gets me excited about Evan Ingram again, and it gets me excited about Sterling Shepard. But beyond that, I don't know where the rest of the targets are going to go. So, I mean, there's some relevance there, and people should be excited, and you probably want to have him in your lineup because he can run and throw. And, if you got a guy on a bye week or something, maybe he's someone you plug in. But,
sorry, I was just watching the game in the
Vernon Davis
Vernon
hurdle.
Davis. Oh, he tried to hurdle him, but he didn't even get to him before he jumped.
He's like, I'm going to jump over this guy. I'm going to jump and land right in front of him.
Mukamura just stands up.
Oh, good. Here we go.
That's a come on, man moment if I've ever seen one.
I'm really hoping the Redskins stick another one in the end zone with Terry McLaurin right here. I've got him on so many
bad for my
rosters.
McLaurin take, but I don't really care because I own enough of him that, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I've got a ton of him. But yeah, no, like we were saying, I like Allen because of the parts. I'll put those parts in my lineup. I'm not starting Allen. I'll start Jones, Evan Ingram, Saquon's obviously out, Sterling Shepard, but no one else beyond that.
All right, I'm up, and I was watching that Bucs offense. Joe had the Giants side. I had the Bucs side of the game. And, I mean, outside of Mike Evans absolutely just destroying, I don't really have a lot of new takeaways for this team. Jameis Winston continues to have weird moments. I think he looks a little better every week, but, again, the interceptions are still there. The mistakes are still there. I'd like to see what happens with a full year in the Arians offense. And I still think they have a lot of impact in their division this year. You know, we talked about Kyle Allen. I like Kyle Allen, but I still think the Bucs defense is good enough to make sure that he's really a non-factor. And with Drew Brees out for a few more weeks, they could potentially still win the division. I'm still not off of that hot take. So again, I need a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more plays to watch to really get my feel for the Bucs offense, but nothing to really make me feel worse than what I was already thinking.
I have a take from that game.
Okay.
I really think that Ronald Jones is the most talented back in that backfield. Like, I don't think he's a world beater by any means, but I think he's better than a lot of the guys that are getting 60%, 70% of the snaps. And I don't understand why he's not being utilized more. Like, this whole approach where you give all the carries to the one guy who gets a 15-yard gain on the first play is stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rojo's probably the most naturally talented guy there, but that's not saying much because the other guys that are there just aren't very good.
No, Peyton Barber sucks.
Yeah, I mean, he's a jag at best. And, you know, I still don't like any of the backs there. But when I'm looking at Winston this past week, throwing all those touchdowns to Evans, was it me or did Evans seem like he was just wide open constantly? Like, I don't feel like these were really heavily contested throws.
No, Janoris Jenkins couldn't handle Mike Evans at all.
Well, that was I had been flipping back and forth, so I wasn't watching that game intently. And it just seemed like every time I saw Mike Evans highlight or saw a Mike Evans catch, he was just standing wide open with no one around him. So, yeah, I'd be excited about my wide receiver one going against Janoris Jenkins moving forward.
Totally. Yeah, that's absolutely a great take. Anyone, I mean, it doesn't even just have to be the wide receiver one. That secondary is trash.
All right, Jeff, we're back up to you. What was your second what to watch for?
You know, I had the trade guys, man. Kenyon Drake, Jalen Ramsey. I wanted to kind of see how they were going to be used. You know, Jalen Ramsey went out and he kind of balled out. I thought he looked pretty decent. You know, he's out there, he's running around, hitting people, made a few plays here and there. I was really wondering about Drake, though. Kenyon Drake got 15 touches. He had 17 total the first 2 weeks combined, but they didn't get him into space at all. They weren't really trying to target him in the pass game. They kept just handing him the ball between the tackles and hoping for the best. And that offensive line isn't good enough for that. You've got to figure out a way to get these weapons that can actually do anything into space and let them do what they do best. They've done nothing but just tank out his trade value. He's not worth anything right now.
Yeah, he had a 58% snap share. So like, and 20% rush percentage on those snaps. So he was getting the work, but when you're playing behind a, at best, college level offensive line, playing against NFL defenses, like, you're not going to have any success.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're having open tryouts or not, but I feel like they could probably get 5 guys off the street to compete with the 5 guys they lined up with on Sunday.
All right, back to me. Man, I was watching that Broncos and Packers game, and I was really hopeful for the Broncos offense, but it doesn't help when the offensive line sucks. Capital S, capital U, capital C, capital K, capital S. Sucks. Flacco was under pressure the entire game. I saw a stat, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it was at least more than 70% of his snaps he was under pressure. The only bright spot of that game was Phillip Lindsay. He had a fantastic fantasy day. So thank goodness for that. But, I mean, 6 sacks. God, we need to get some offensive line help in the next draft.
All right, so I get it. Like, the offensive line narrative works, but Joe Flacco on the season has been sacked a total of 11 times. 8 of those times he's held the ball for 2.5 seconds or more. And most of them, when I've been watching, have been significantly longer than that. So I'm not totally blaming the offensive line. When you're going to stand there like a statue in the pocket, go through your progression slowly, and then not have any mobility once the pocket collapses, just be a better quarterback or get a better quarterback, Elway.
I mean, hey, we're in the running for Tank for 2 at this point. So,
yeah, I mean, I think Miami gets the number 1 overall pick. Like, the Broncos are going to pull out a win at some point. They almost beat the Bears. But you've got to think they're going to have a top 5 pick at worst.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be Tua for the Broncos. Although, you know, you never know. Maybe he doesn't go number 1. The Dolphins have done crazier things. Jake Fromm's a guy that he can play. He's got the right traits. He's not putting up the digits that gets everyone excited. But man, I just feel like after the combine and all the workouts are done, we're going to be talking about that guy as an early first-round pick and potentially a high-end quarterback prospect that's going to be going somewhere like Denver.
This is a pretty strong quarterback class coming up. It may not be the strongest we've seen in the last few years, but it's strong for sure.
It's not bad, that's for sure. I mean, I think Herbert's a little overhyped for me. I'm not a real big fan there. But I really like from a trait standpoint, I think he looks the part and he plays well, especially in the biggest moments. And then, of course, Tua, I mean, what's not to love there? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talent that's going to be coming up in this next draft. I'm very excited about it.
You know, I think after a year in Oklahoma, I think Jalen Hurts sneaks in on day 2. I really do.
I wouldn't be surprised with the prevalence of the air raid style, or at least the spread concepts and all that. I mean, Oklahoma does a ton of that. And Lincoln Riley, I mean, he can prepare some quarterbacks now. I mean, Baker and Kyler both went number 1.
His build also, I feel like if a team wants a Taysom Hill type player, he runs like a running back. So, I mean, you can throw him in there for those kind of packages. All right, we're getting off the track here. Joe, you are back up. What was your second what to watch for?
I was watching that Chiefs-Ravens game, and man, Patrick Mahomes, even in some bad weather, looked like he is completely unstoppable. That Ravens defense is good, and he shredded them. Lamar Jackson on the other side, I had some questions about the way that he played. Early on, he looked a lot more like 2018 Lamar Jackson than first 2 weeks of 2019 Lamar Jackson. He ended up with a pretty nice fantasy score. You know that he's going to have that rushing floor if he can't get it together in the passing game. But, man, if I could trade high on Lamar Jackson, I probably would.
I think that people are going to be unwilling to sell on Lamar Jackson after watching Patrick Mahomes last year. I think there's a lot of that I've got the next Mahomes mentality out there. It really depends on your return, right? Quarterback's always deep enough on the wire. But if you've got a competent second quarterback on your roster in a 1 QB league, I'd be fine with trading him if I could get a haul.
Yeah, like say in Dynasty, you can go out and put together a package where you can get rid of one of your aging players, get rid of Lamar Jackson, and bring back a Devontae Adams type, a Juju Smith-Schuster type, one of the underperforming wide receiver ones. I'm doing it every time.
All right, that'll do it for our booth reviews. Let's jump into, again, one of the new segments of the season, The Takeaway.
The Takeaway.
All right, just a quick reminder, this segment is just kind of our individual takeaways from the weekend outside of our booth reviews. Joe, kick us off on this one.
My takeaway is really simple this week. Start your quarterbacks, stream your quarterbacks. I don't care who it is. I would probably start Teddy Bridgewater if I was in a pinch against the Arizona defense, because look at what they've done. Matthew Stafford, week 1, 33.5 points. Lamar Jackson, week 2, 33.6 points. The worst game for any quarterback against this team so far this year was Kyle Allen at 29 points. It's just a situation where I think their defense is so bad and their offense runs so many plays that you're going to have success almost no matter who you're starting. Maybe don't start Bridgewater, but like if your line is like quarterback 27, go for it. Start him against Arizona.
Who do they play this week, Joe?
Play the Seahawks, don't they?
Yeah, they do. It was a setup. I figured you already knew that. So you've got
Russell Wilson.
So we're wheels up on Russell Wilson, and then you've got Andy Dalton on deck.
Yep, I'll start either of those guys. Those would probably be my cash lineup DFS quarterbacks for the next 2 weeks.
I like it.
All right, I'm up next, and I want to talk a little bit about the Browns, and not the way I talk about them in the preseason when I'm all excited and happy. I am very disappointed, as is pretty much everybody in the football and fantasy community. Separate ones, everybody's disappointed. I think I see one of the reasons why. Joe, you speculated, I believe it was this morning or yesterday in one of our group chats, that Baker is hurt, and that's always possible. But I saw an article where Freddie Kitchens has admitted that he was having trouble as an offensive play caller. He's still figuring out how to call the plays, and he refuses to hand that over to an offensive coordinator. So that might be the biggest problem right there, is the head coach is not making good decisions, and the offense is visibly suffering for it.
Give it to Todd Monken.
Yes.
You've got Todd effing Monken. Use him. What are you doing? I just want to shake Freddie Kitchens. I just want to shake him.
It would be very concerning to me if I were a GM that was going to hire somebody and they said, I want a head coach and I want to call the plays. Because, like, how often do you have success doing that? Look at what the Bears are doing right now. Go back, look at what the Giants did when who was the Giants coach that they fired Coughlin and then hired him.
McAdoo.
Yeah,
McAdoo.
McAdoo. They promoted McAdoo. Like, he tried to call the plays.
Dirk Cutter
In Tampa Bay. Like, it just doesn't work. You can't go out there and call all the plays and coordinate. You just can't do it all. You can't be a head coach and the coordinator. Let the guy who has experience do the job. Unless you're Sean McVay and Wade Phillips.
I'm going to go back and rewatch some film from this Browns game just on the sidelines and see if Freddie is wearing a bracelet that says WWHJD. What would Hugh Jackson do? Because this feels like a Browns move.
Oh, man.
Like,
for real, I think Baker Mayfield's thumb situation is not good because Baker Mayfield is one of the best quarterbacks in terms of intermediate to deep middle of the field accuracy, and he has not had it at this point in the season. Like, up through 3 weeks, I haven't seen the same quarterback that I saw down the stretch last year.
I will challenge either of you to go watch Baker Mayfield any 3 games last year. Watch how he keeps his eyes down the field, how he uses subtle movement to evade the rush when there is some, because the O-line was better last year. And he delivers the ball in the intermediate and deep spaces with ease. Compared to this year, first 3 games, and watch how quickly his eye level drops off.
Seeing ghosts.
This guy he's already seeing ghosts. He's already in a position where the pressure has gotten to him and it's in his head. He's rattled. And that's not a good look for this guy. It's supposed to have all this swagger. I really need to see more out of him before I can roll, with him in my lineup with any kind of confidence. Right now, he's a QB2 in my book. I'm not confident starting him as a 1. He needs to figure out how to get the ball to Odell Beckham more often in space.
all right, Jeff, you're up. Round out this segment for us. What is your takeaway from the weekend?
The Pittsburgh offense, I was so excited about it this offseason. I was pumped about Juju. He was my wide receiver 1. I was pumped about James Conner as a running back 1. I really like the idea of having Moncrief in there as a number 2. You got, Deontay Johnson, the rookie. You've got James Washington, all these different parts. And it seemed like it was going to be just this high flying fantasy bonanza. Then Big Ben goes down. And after watching Mason Rudolph play against the 49ers, whose defense may be great, I'm a 49ers fan. I'm still tempering my expectations here, and I don't want to call them great just yet. He looked bad. He really struggled with pressure. He didn't throw well on the move. I just don't see him as a guy in this division where he's going to see a lot of heat from teams like Cleveland and Baltimore, etc., faring particularly well. And, I think it might be a long year in Pittsburgh.
I think the Juju Smith-Schuster take about being the number 1 wide receiver is probably dead. And I will totally give you a mulligan on that. But I do think that Mason Rudolph can get better. I think that the defense that he went up against the 49ers is pretty good. So if there's a Juju Smith-Schuster owner that's panicking out there and you can buy low, especially in Dynasty, go do it. Because he's a kid. He's still learning how to be a number 1 wide receiver, and Mason Rudolph is going to get better. So he got 7 targets again. He only caught 3 of them with the touchdown, but I think he's going to be okay. If people are going to sell him for wide receiver 2 value at this point, go get him.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I have a few rosters where I'd love to go add him in Dynasty. I just don't know that anybody in Dynasty is going to be ready to part with him. Maybe keeper. Somebody maybe parts with him, depending on what the value to keep him is. Like, hey, I got to keep Juju, but I got to give him a 3 or a 4. Someone might panic and trade him.
Yeah, I feel like even if there isn't somebody in your league that's going to trade him, you should still try because there's got to be a few panicking Juju Smith-Schuster owners out there somewhere.
Tapping the wire.
We are almost to the end, guys, but no Tuesday show would be complete without tapping the wire. Let's start out with quarterbacks, kind of the obvious ones, Daniel Jones, Kyle Allen, and I'm going to throw out one last time, Gardner Minshew.
I miss you.
I love it. He's so good, too. Like, he's not like a world beater by any means, but I think he's a better quarterback than Nick Foles.
Yep. That's all I'm going to add to that.
And more stylish than Cam Newton. Gotta love it.
I love the memes, too, man. Like, the Cam Newton is like the church lady, Dana Carvey, with what he's got going on lately. And Gardner Minshew is like Ron Jeremy. I'll take the Ron Jeremy every time.
Absolutely. Wait. Yeah.
I've seen him described as like the quintessential 80s man. So that's
he's straight
enjoyable.
disco as far as I'm concerned. And that's something that I can be into.
Did you guys see the Washington State game by chance this weekend?
No.
So
with him in the jorts?
Yeah, he was there wearing some
I
jorts.
did see a picture of him in the jorts.
Yeah.
That's quality stuff as far as I'm concerned.
The sideline interview was classic because I asked if he bought them like that or if he cut them. He's like, oh, no, man, I cut these on my own. He's like, it's my work. He's like, and he kind of like pulls at some of the strings trying to clean them up. It was so good.
I feel like if he hadn't been at a game in his alma mater, if they just done that interview at a random football game, he might have caught him on the sidelines with a natty ice in his hand, just ready to crack it. Just that's the feel you get from the vibe.
He's going to shotgun that. You kidding me? He's got a dirty 30 just somewhere on the sideline, just hanging out.
Let's put Gardner Minshew on the sideline of an NBA game during the next season. We'll see it.
I'll go hang out with him.
Yeah, me too. I buy tickets to that.
All right, moving on to running backs. The obvious one for the week is Wayne Gallman with Saquon Barkley out for 6 to 8 weeks. Wayne Gallman is probably one of the number one waiver ads of the week, right?
Yeah, and it sucks because he's a bad running back. Like, he is not a talented running back, but he's going to get a ton of opportunity, and that offensive line has been playing pretty well. If this offense is anything close to as good as it was in week 3, he's going to get some opportunity to score, and that's a guy that you want. Like, I don't know how much fab to spend on him, but you got to spend some, especially if you're the Saquon Barkley owner.
I actually liked Gallman at Clemson. He hasn't translated well to the NFL, but you're right. That O-line is playing a lot better. And with games against the Redskins this week, he's probably a no-brainer play unless you've got some other depth on your roster already. You lost Saquon, who's your running back 3. Well, Gallman might be an easy plug and play. They get the Vikings the next week. I always like to look ahead at the matchups, right? And, I think about having the Vikings, the Patriots, the Cardinals, and the Lions all on deck after that during the Saquon injury. You got at least 3 favorable matchups there. I'm probably going to get him. I'm willing to spend, probably 25% of my fab to grab him.
Yeah, I think 25% was my line where that's somewhere around where I'll go. Since this show comes out before we actually do our waivers, I don't want to put a number on it so I can get him in my leagues, but
And the other guy I have listed is Darryl Williams out of Kansas City. Jeff, you were actually questioning this in the pre-show, and it's essentially you just invest in high-powered offenses. If, Damian Williams and LaShawn McCoy are all hobbled at the moment, go get the guy behind him. At least for a few weeks, he'll be valuable for you.
And both of those guys have injury issues, especially late in his career for LaShawn McCoy. There's a good chance that Darryl Williams ends up being the guy, and he's an adequate pass catcher. I don't think he's a good running back by any means, but he's shown enough to be a productive running back in this system.
Depending on your roster makeup and depending on what someone's going to spend, because somebody is going to overspend their fab on Darryl Williams this week. If you've got a roster spot, go add Darwin Thompson and sit on him. He only got a couple of carries, but when he did touch the ball, he looked explosive. He looked quick. He looked quick and he looked fast. He's the kind of guy where I could see him against Detroit, definitely against Indianapolis, and potentially against the Texans, seeing a few catches out of the backfield if we still have no Damian Williams and we still have no LaShawn McCoy, or if they're just both beat up, that he could be a sneaky difference maker that you could get super cheap this week in lieu of Darryl Williams.
Joe, that's all I had. Are there any lower owned guys you want to throw out for the running back position?
Well, actually not really on this one, but I do want to mention that Ronald Jones is only owned in 33% of leagues. Like I talked about earlier, I think that he's the best running back, most talented running back, at least in that backfield. There's a chance that he takes over and starts getting more like a 50% snap share and getting more like 60% of the carries if things go right. And that's a guy, I'm not playing him by any means. I don't think that backfield's predictable at this point. But I do think that somewhere down the road, he might be a valuable starter.
All right, moving into wide receivers, I have quite a few names here. Phillip Dorsett, Deontay Johnson, DJ Chark, and just kind of a side note, check your waivers. Golden Tate does come back. I believe it's this week, right, from his suspension, or is it next week?
Week 5. It was a 4-game suspension.
Yeah. Either way, go ahead and stash him if he's there, especially with Daniel Jones in that offense now. It seems like a good move.
Yeah, totally. And he's only owned in 42.3% of leagues consensus on Fantasy Pros. So he's a guy that's out there, and he's a pretty productive player in his history.
So I want to point out DJ Chark real quick, 41% ownership. Do you guys know where he is on wide receiver ranking so far into the season?
I don't know, top 5. He's up there.
He's wide receiver 8 so far in the season, 60.7 points. At 41% ownership, grab him. That's going to be great. Let's Gardner Minshew, man.
Yeah, I think Chark might be playing out of his head a little bit at this point, but he's getting the kind of target share that can support that fringe wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. I don't think he stays there, but he's going to be usable.
I mean, I actually had an Allen Robinson comp on this guy when he came out of LSU. I liked him quite a bit, and I bagged him in a ton of rookie drafts, and I've been sitting on him, and I'm so glad to see that he's getting some work in finally. I don't know that he's fully flash in the pan, but I don't know that he's a legit wide receiver 1 either. I could see him finishing the season as a low-end wide receiver 2, top-end wide receiver 3.
Yeah, that's right about where I'm at on him. Like, I think he's a good, solid player, but I don't think if he's out there on your waiver wire still for some reason, don't go out there and spend 50% of your budget on him if you're not totally wide receiver needy.
Agreed.
So Phillip Dorsett, guys, I want to end this on him. With Antonio Brown gone, finito, thank goodness. He's got a pretty set role in this offense, and they're going to score points. So what do you guys think about Phillip Dorsett?
Fantastic. 92% snap share. Like, a little bit of that has to do with Julian Edelman getting hurt, but how long is Julian Edelman going to be out? Like, they're still doing diagnosis on what that rib/chest injury is. And Josh Gordon had some issues with injury in that game too. Phillip Dorsett might end up being the primary option in this offense before things are all said and done. And Tom Brady's playing well enough that even if it's Phillip Dorsett, I want it. Even if he's the wide receiver 3, I still want it. But if he's the wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1, give me all of it.
Yeah, the Patriots usually they start kind of cold and they kind of get off to a slow start in September. But man, they are firing on all cylinders. I mean, I would say like a team possessed. They just look really, really good. Beat up Pittsburgh before Big Ben goes down. You know, they beat up Miami, but who hasn't? And they just keep looking good no matter who they play. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get in on that offense any way I can at this point.
They might have the softest schedule to start off a season that I've ever seen too. Like, Pittsburgh was kind of a tough matchup on paper, but it looked like Big Ben was hurt already at that point. I think they get to play the Jets twice maybe without Darnold. Even with Darnold, they're not that good. Like, holy cow, is that schedule easy?
Well, I think on paper, the Jets looked a lot better before they lost both their middle linebackers and Darnold goes down. And, you know, that O-line was still suspect. But, I mean, you know, Quinnen Williams wasn't hurt yet. That defense looked pretty formidable about 6 weeks ago. And now the Jets kind of look like a mess. And Pittsburgh now looks like a mess. And Miami we knew was a mess. So I think maybe, 2-3 months ago, it didn't look this easy, but still New England looks sharp. Like, they don't look like
they look great.
Yeah. They're not playing badly, beating bad teams. They're playing really well, beating up bad teams. So something to be aware of. Definitely makes me want to get my hands on Phillip Dorsett.
Also, Jared Stidham is not going to Tom Brady.
No,
yeah,
not even
a chance.
So I was watching the first half of that Patriots-Jets game this week, and they mentioned a weird stat. If the Jets had only scored, I believe it was 7 points that whole game, the Patriots would have broken the record for biggest point differential through the first 3 weeks of the season, outscoring opponents like 100 to, it's been like 100 to 20, something like that. It's probably more points and less points on either end of that, but it's some ridiculous stat.
Sounds like something I've done on Madden.
Yeah, it's stupid. Tom Brady, retire.
But I was playing on rookie when it happened, so it's.
You always play on rookie, though, right?
Oh, I mean, I like to play on veteran every now and again. You know, I like to win by at least 100. You know, I can't win by 100. I don't want to play anymore.
All right, Joe. Before we move into tight ends, do you got any lower owned wide receivers you want to throw out?
Well, he kind of threw out a stinker, but I'm going to talk about Damiere Byrd again because he had a 96% snap share, the highest on the team, and if that team is running that many plays on offense as a matchup-based play, you could do a lot worse than Damiere Byrd. Also, Devin Smith, while Michael Gallup is out, he got a 91.7% snap share this week. That was best on the team. So he didn't really perform all that well, but when you're getting that many snaps, you're bound to catch some passes every now and then. And then Preston Williams also, like he was kind of the hotness and he's died off, but he's giving you double-digit performances pretty much every week. And it was the first time that he led the team in snaps. He was actually tied with Parker. They were on the field for basically all the passing plays together. So those are the ones. Also, JJ Nelson, he's a guy that maybe you want to look at because he's really kind of like jumped up above the rest of the guys in that Raiders offense.
Any hype for Taylor Gabriel or Paul Richardson? They were the two big guys from the Monday night game.
I certainly wouldn't be investing in Taylor Gabriel with what it's going to take to get him unless your league is smart. Like, I might spend a couple of bucks at Fab, but I definitely wouldn't spend a number one waiver priority, and I definitely wouldn't go over like maybe 5% of my budget. Gabriel's had flashes before, so this isn't crazy, but he's not a guy that's going to go out and give you this kind of performance week in and week out.
Yeah, he's definitely too much of a gadget play for me.
All right, and finally, let's end this on tight ends. I mainly just have Will Dissly. We already talked about it earlier. The matchup this week is ridiculously choice. So, I mean, and he's done pretty well so far this season. I mean, tight end's kind of hard to predict. So go grab Will Dissly.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of red zone work. 3 red zone targets, but he caught all 3 of them in the first 3 weeks. So that's a guy, especially if you're looking at good matchups and you're just streaming, Dissly's a guy that you could do a lot worse than.
Yeah, I like Dissly. He actually came up really favorably in my rating system. For whatever reason, I kept coming up with him as like a high-end tight end too. I didn't understand why, but it was all about red zone usage and touchdowns. Another guy that I might be looking at is Hayden Hurst. I notice him sitting on a lot of waiver wires right now. And Mark Andrews appears to be a little nicked up. So he didn't get a ton of love, this week. And, I think if I'm going to go ahead and err on a tight end, I'll take one, out of Baltimore where they just love throwing to tight ends.
OJ Howard's going to be okay too. Like, he's still really highly owned. A lot of people haven't given up on him, but if the owner in your league did, you got to go pick him up. He's a better option than most of these garbage waiver wire tight ends.
I like it.
All right, guys, that is it for our week 3 review show. Any final thoughts, Jeff, Joe?
Maybe Dawson Knox and Demetrius Harris in really deep or tight end premium leagues because they both had pretty nice snap shares.
Really like Dawson Knox this week. He looked real good.
Yeah, he looked good. It's not like he caught a touchdown, I think, right?
Yeah, and he also Chris Conti'd somebody.
Yeah, totally. It's not like he didn't have one of those games that like jumps off the stat sheet, but he looked good in the game, and it looks like in that offense, Josh Allen's trying to target the tight end. So,
well, it's about time now. If Tyler Kroft ever gets on the field, I hope that doesn't impact Knox because I like Knox a lot more as a player.
I think Knox is better than Tyler Kroft. Like, I don't know if he knows the playbook well enough to stay on the field for enough snaps to be viable, but I think he's a better player.
No, I totally agree with that. That's why I'm dreading the idea of having, Kroft come back.
All right, that'll do it for this one. We will be back on Thursday with our usual prep show. We're going to have our cheap dates, our what to watch fors, and all that fantasy goodness. For Joe at Human Stat Sheet on Twitter, for Jeff at NFL_DiMatteo, and of course myself at MurphyFFT, or find us all in the NFL Fantasy Football Discussion Group. We'll see you on Thursday. Bye, guys.
Later.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway.